Now, in the last lesson, we were talking about grouped data. And what does it mean if we talk about a group of data or grouped data? Maybe somebody can put it in the chat what they remember from the last lesson about grouped data. What makes data grouped? What do you need, or what do we normally have? Is my question to start today. You can put it in the chat, or you can raise your hand. What do I mean when I have grouped data? Yes, I like it, Ntokozo. We normally talk about intervals or class intervals into which the data may fall. So maybe if we were talking about percentages, let me make sure we could have, let's say 40 to 50. No, let's just stop there for now. So normally what we do is we have, instead of having exact values, we have intervals into which the data can fall. And so we don't know exactly what the value is. We just know it's in a range somewhere. So give me a thumbs up if you remember that from the last lesson. I'm making a bit of a funky table here while you guys are getting settled in. And so sometimes we can go straight to the frequency column, but sometimes we even do a tally to count how often something falls into that interval. And then normally we get what's called a frequency column. And the frequency column will tell us how many items fall into that interval. So we might get like 3 items between 0 and 10, maybe 5 items between 10 and 20, maybe 6 items between 20 and 30, maybe 3 items here, 2 items here, 1 item there. And so that gives us how many items fall into the interval. If I ask you what is the modal interval, now I can't ask you what the mode is because I don't have specific values, but I ask you what's the modal interval. What would you tell me for this example? What interval will be the modal interval? Ntokozo, let's go to you. What interval do you think it is? You can just unmute if you look at the thing there. Otherwise, I'll just go to the chat. Okay, maybe Ntokozo is just having a little bit of problem unmuting, but I see in the chat many students are saying that it is between 20 and 30. So that would be this one over here. Then the other thing that we can find with group data is we can find the median interval. So I want to ask you to try and find the median interval. And for those who really know what's going on, maybe you can give us a tip. What should I start with to find the median interval? What do I need to do in this example that I've made up here? Where should I start? Find the position. Yes, Morgan. Yes, Oam. So we don't even know how many items are in our data set. So what I would call the N number, the number of items, I actually need a total of my frequency column. So how many items am I going to actually, how many items do I have in my data set here? So I guess I have to count them. Hey, 3 plus 5 is 8. 14. How many do I have in total? 14, 17, 19, 20. Looks to me like I have 20 items. So that's how many items I have in my group data table. But that's not the answer to the median interval. Now, I have to calculate the position of the median. And another word for the median is Q2. And so we find the position by going 1/2 times n plus 1, where n is the number of items. So my position is the 10.5th position. So what interval is going to be the median interval, using the fact that it's sort of between the 10th and 11th item that the median interval occurs? Who has an idea? Maybe you can put your hand up and tell me, or talk me through how you find it. How do you find the median interval? Aha. So I see a couple of answers coming through in the chat. Keep them coming. Is anybody willing, Morgan, would you be willing to tell us how you did it? How did you count it, or how did you get there? Just pop your hand up if you're willing to maybe talk us through it. Or who feels like they can talk? How did you go from this 10.5 to this interval that you're saying there? Okay, if we could unmute Morgan.
Tshegofatso's already unmuted. She had her hand up.
Okay, cool. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hello. How did you get to the answer?
I got to the answer because on the first interval, it's between 0 to 10. And
Okay.
the median interval is 10.5, which is between 10 and 20, which is the second interval.
Okay, I almost agree with you, but here's the thing. You need to get to the 10th position. Now, you've got 3 items over here. If you add 3 plus 5, what do you get?
It's 8.
8. Okay, now, have you got far enough into the list to get to the middle, to the median position? Because
No,
remember, we're trying to get to 10 and you're at 8 now. Do you need to go a little bit further?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what interval do you think it's going to be then for the median interval?
Isn't it between 20 to 30?
Yes, perfect. Because you need, what's going to happen is you basically need to jump from this one, and then you've gone 14 of the way through. And so the median interval is also going to be between 20 and 30. Okay. Lovely, lovely. Thank you so much. So this is the basic idea of working with grouped data. And the other thing we did in the previous lesson was we learned how to find the third measure of central tendency, which is the estimated mean. And we did that using our calculator. I'm not going to do that now, but you can look at the second half of the last lesson if you want a bit of a recap on how we find the estimated mean for a grouped data table. And the reason it's estimated is we don't know the exact values. We have to estimate them with the midpoints. So then what I want to talk about now, in fact, give me a thumbs up if everybody's following. Give me a thumbs down if you're feeling a bit unsure about what I've spoken about so far today. Okay, awesome. So we're moving from lists of data to tables or groups of data. This is awesome. Now, the 2 graphs that we're going to talk about are graphs that you get for grouped data. And the 2 graphs we're going to talk about are the histogram and the frequency polygon. So that's going to be the main focus today. And it's a way of displaying the information in our grouped data table. So let's just start with this histogram. And the story of this histogram is as follows. Jim measured the temperature at 2 p.m. at the same spot in his garden and recorded his results to the nearest degree for each day of the year. The results are shown in the following histogram. And what we have along the bottom horizontal axis is intervals. So 30 to 40, 40 to 50, and so on. And then on the vertical axis, we have the frequency or the count of the number of days in which it was in that temperature range. So basically here, there were maybe like 60, what's this going up in? That's 70. So there was maybe like 65 or 63 days in the year where it was between 30 and 40 degrees. Okay, so that's what it's being shown. It's intervals and the counts of their interval. It says here, on approximately how many days was the 2 p.m. temperature above 70 degrees Fahrenheit? So I want you to try and read this grouped data table and then tell me the answer that you think goes with this question. Look at the table and it's an approximate answer. So what did I say about this one? I said this is about 63. I guess this one is about 132. That one is about 75. Maybe this one's about 6. What's this, like 50? Hard to see exactly, but let's say it's like 51. This one is about 22. Guess this one is about 10, 12, 14, somewhere around there. Now, the key thing to realize is above 70 degrees is actually going to be from that point onwards. And so only these two intervals are going to be relevant to us. And so it can't be that, it can't be that, and it can't be that. So it's going to be somewhere in the 30s. And so the correct answer is going to be B. Okay. Okay, so I just seen Lungile. Lungile, we're going to start with ogives today and then carry on in the next lesson. Okay, here is another question. It says Jim measured the daily rainfall in millimeters at the same spot in his garden for each day in the year. He recorded the results to the nearest millimeter. How many days was the rainfall less than 10 millimeters? And then Tando, can we unmute Tando who has a question? Hi, Tando, can you hear me? Okay, Tando, I think Kia's going to unmute you. Can you hear me?
Sir, yes, I can hear you.
What is your question, Tando?
Sir, can we go back to the previous question? I'm so confused to how you got approximately 39.
Okay, I'm going to do it with this one. We're going to do the same idea. Are you happy that on the vertical axis, this is the count of the number of days, or we'll call the frequency of days, how many days there are? Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, now if you look here, on the horizontal axis, we have rainfall. So that's between 0 and 5. That's between 5 and 10, 10 and 15, and so on. This is the number of days there is between 0 and 5 millimeters of rain. And if you go up, it looks to me like here's 140, here's 120. So that would be like halfway. So that would be 130. And so this would be about 135 if I look across. Do you follow how I got 135 there?
Yes, I can follow.
Perfect. Would you agree with me that this one is about 81 or 82 for the green one?
Yes.
Okay, so are we okay then?
Yes, we are.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So which answer do we think is the correct one? It says, Garden, how many days was the rainfall less than? So it's less than 10 millimeters. Well, where's the cutoff point? The cutoff point has to be here. And so these are the two intervals that I want to count.
So you add 135 and 81 and then...
Perfect.
Okay.
What do you get?
Okay. Then you get 216.
Yep. Winning at life. Thank you very much. That is awesome.
Thank you, sir.
Pleasure. Okay, now, and just another thing to show you that you could always go backwards from this table, all right? So if you wanted to, you could make a table, and in your table, So you need to be able to go backwards and forwards. If you imagine our table, you would have 0 to 5, you would have 5 to 10, you would have 10 to 15, 15 to 20, 20 to 25, 25 to 30. So you can get the interval from the graph, and then you could also just have, after having the interval, you could also just have a frequency column, you know, where you literally count off the graph, and you can fill in those values. Give me a thumbs up if you follow how you could go from the graph to the grouped data table. Give me a thumbs down if what I'm doing is a mystery to you, how I'm going from the grouped data table to the from the graph to the grouped data table. So all I'm doing is I'm looking at the bottom and I'm seeing it's going in 5s, and that's where my interval came from. And then the frequency count is just how many items there are in that interval. Okay. So just a reminder as we go. Now, the histogram is a very, very easy graph, okay? Because all you have is the intervals along the bottom, and you have the counts on the sort of columns, and there's no spaces. A histogram will never have spaces between the intervals. Now, what is a frequency polygon? All a frequency polygon does, and I'm going to explain this again later in the lesson, but it adds an interval on this side. So what do you think this interval on this side is going to go up to? 30, what's going to be the next number after 30? Okay, it wouldn't be 40. It would be 35. Okay, and if I went 5 below here, I guess I would just go down to -5. Okay, so I'm just adding an interval to each side. And the wonderful thing about a frequency polygon, okay, let me even just write this down. So I'm now explaining, I have a histogram, and I want to show you how we can connect something called a frequency polygon. All you do is you go to the middle of each interval. So you go to the middle of each interval and you make a dot. So halfway between 5 and 10 will be 7.5. Halfway between 0 and 5 will be 2.5. And you just make a dot. Okay. Now you've got these 2 extra intervals that you've added. So you make a dot there. And so this is that the polygon will close. And all you do, oh, that's not a very good drawing. Let me try that again. You take your ruler and you connect the straight line. Let me try that one again. And all you do is you take straight lines and you connect those midpoints to each other. And that is called a frequency polygon because it's made up of straight edges. And these 2 extra intervals here just close the frequency polygon. So in some ways, a histogram and a frequency polygon are kind of the same graph. It's just that a frequency polygon kind of takes less space up, and it's a bit easier to compare 2 things. Now, I want to show you, that was just my warm-up explanation, but let's just see how I did. So thumbs up if you feel like you understand what a frequency polygon is. Thumbs down if you feel a bit like, ish, what is going on here? And you can be honest, you won't hurt my feelings, I promise. Okay. So all that you do to go from a histogram to go to a frequency polygon is you add 2 extra intervals on each side. You then make a dot in the middle of each interval. Okay. And then you connect those dots with straight lines. Okay. And so this thing is called, this shape that I'm getting here, it looks a bit like this. That looks a bit like a mountain there. That's called a frequency polygon. You'll see as we go into the lesson a bit more, we'll do some more of it. I just wanted to kind of get you guys warmed up here. Okay, So what I want you to do is I want you to draw me a histogram now. Okay, so you're going to do this yourself. And in order to draw a histogram, you need two things. You need a vertical axis and a horizontal axis. And I want you to think what needs to go along this axis and what needs to go along this axis over here. And I want you to try and draw in a histogram for this example over here. So off we go. I'm going to give you some time to draw your histogram. And all I want you to do is I'm going to maybe I'm going to leave an extra interval on each side here. So leave a bit of space. We'll start at 10 there. That's the one hint I'll give you. So leave that. You start at 10. And then if you're unsure about how to start your histogram, put your hand up and I'll answer your question. You don't have to use the scale. You could have used a scale. Maybe I should use a scale of going up in ones. It doesn't really matter as long as you're consistent. So I could go 1, 2. What's the highest number I get to? Okay, I think I get that's about fine. So on the y-axis, we will always have the frequency for the histogram. And on the horizontal axis, we will always have the interval. In this case, the thing that is being measured is percentage. So this is the percentages. So two students got between 10 and 20. And the way I'm going to show that is that there's a bar that goes up to 2 between 10 and 20. And then the next one goes up to 4. So between 20 and 30, it's going to look like that. Now, you don't have to color it in like I'm doing. I'm just doing that for effect. See if you can finish off the rest of that histogram. What have we got next? 4. That kind of makes it easy, huh? And then give me a thumbs up when you feel like you've finished your histogram, so I know kind of how much time to give you guys. So maybe I'll even tick them off as I go, otherwise I might lose track of where I am. Yeah, so there you go. All right. So we have our histogram, and my histogram is just showing me the performance of students in a class. Okay, now I've got my histogram. I want you to now draw a frequency polygon on this histogram. So take your histogram that you've got, and I want you to draw a frequency polygon that goes over this histogram. So see if you can do that now. So what is your first thing that you need to do when you're converting a histogram to a frequency polygon? Maybe somebody can put it in the chat if you're feeling generous. What's the first? If you want to get a frequency polygon from your histogram, what do you need to do? Ground the graph. Yes. So you add an extra interval and it's going to be halfway in those extra intervals. So you ground the graph there. Those are my two extra intervals here and here. Remember, it's halfway. What else do I need to do? Thanks, Orikanisa, for that tip. Midpoints, yes, midpoints on each of the intervals. Okay, now what is the last step that I need to do to create a frequency polygon? Okay, now you join, because it's a polygon. Polygon has straight lines. So you take your ruler and you draw in your straight lines. And there we have our frequency polygon superimposed over my histogram. And so in a lot of ways, the frequency polygon is actually very simple. Now, sometimes they may say to you, what is the coordinate of some point on the frequency polygon? And so one of the things that can be helpful is to add an extra column for the midpoint of an interval. So sometimes if they give you the histogram, it's so quick, you don't even need to do this. But it can be helpful to just know what is the midpoint of these intervals. And you'll notice here, like the midpoint would be 15. The midpoint here would be 25. The midpoint here would be 35. And so you can also add an extra column for the midpoint. And then the actual coordinates for these dots will just be whatever the coordinate of the midpoint is. So let's say this one over here. That'll be in line with 15. So 15. And then the frequency count would just be 2. And so that would be the coordinate of the red dot over here. And so just to be aware, the second one over here, this would be in line with 25, and it would be in line with 4. And so if you ever need to get its coordinates, you just simply use the midpoint of the interval. Give me a thumbs up if you followed the idea of knowing that the points on the frequency polygon are the midpoints. Are you okay with me finding the midpoints by looking at the actual interval? Okay. Now, most of the time you don't need to know that, but I just wanted to show you because, it's good to know if you have to find it using numbers, you don't just find it visually, you can find it using the numbers. We'll do some more of that after the break, so don't stress if you're unsure about that. But yeah, we've done really well. This first half of the lesson, we did some recapping, and we introduced the histogram and the frequency polygon. And so I think it is time for a break. So I'd like everybody, cameras on. I'd like to see your faces, and we're going to jump around a bit. So let's start by just standing up and swinging our arms a little bit. Nice small circles. And going into bigger ones. And then change direction, like you're doing the butterfly in the pool. I wish I could swim butterfly, but I'm still learning. And then small circles. And then we're going to twist a little bit. So a nice little slow rotation to start with while your hips are warming up. And then as you loosen up, we are feeling free. Oh, aren't we having fun in maths today? Okay, then let's roll the shoulders. So roll the shoulders back, and while we're rolling the shoulders, we look up and we let our eyes focus somewhere in the distance to give them a break. And we roll our shoulders forward, and we fix our eyes on the opposite side of the room. Okay. Shake it all out. Let's take 3 nice deep breaths. So 1, 2, 3. Another one. And one more. Oh, look at that lovely oxygen going through my body. Okay, and then let's do some heart rate raising. So make sure that you're clear. You're not going to whack anything or anyone. And we're just going to do 15 jumping jacks in 3, 2, 1. Let's go. 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, and that is the exercise break done. Kia, who do you think wins the prize for the best assistant, gym assistant today? Please keep an eye on for the for the people who look like maybe one day they can take the exercise break. I can hand over control to one of the students. They can lead us. I think that would be a cool idea. What do you think? Let me know in the chat. Should we hand over control? Lungile, okay. Cool, Lungile. I think in the future we're going to have to give you a control for one session where you get to lead us through a little something. Okay, here's today's puzzle. Can you tell me, so it says the first piece of the space station launched in 19 something, and by solving this puzzle, you will work out what year it would be. So that is a 9. I agree. Students are saying that there is a 9 there. And then this, Artie said that's a 50. So then that must be a 50 and a 50. Okay. Is that right? 50 and 50 minus something is 20. So I'm guessing that is going to be, what's this? I think this is going to be an 80, isn't it? Because 50 and 50 is 100 minus 80 is 20. So then that must be an 80. So what is 80 plus 9 plus 9? Miguel and Bali and Morgan, Aksase, Sadiq. Okay, everyone's got 98. So it appears the first piece of the space station launched in 1998. Jeepers, it's a while ago. I don't think you guys were even born then. 1998, back in the day. Okay, so that is when the first space station, piece of the International Space Station was launched. Okay, that is our break for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I did. I enjoyed our exercise session, and I liked the brain puzzle. It was kind of interesting. Kibetu, you weren't even born either. Oh my goodness, I'm the old person in the room. I can remember that very well. Anyway, that's a story for another time. So what I want to do now is, let's see, should we do one more histogram? Let's do that again. So I'm giving you this frequency table. And in fact, you know what? Instead of drawing the histogram, I want you to, actually, let's do a histogram. That's fine. So draw me a histogram for this data set. Okay. And what I also want you to do is I also want you to do a midpoint column, because that's going to help us when afterwards we're also going to do a frequency polygon. So I'm going to ask you to draw a histogram for this data. And then after that, I also want you to draw a frequency polygon. And then I want you to complete the column for midpoint. And I also want you to complete the column for the coordinates on the frequency polygon, which I'll explain when we do it. Okay, over to you guys, and then I'll do it slowly as you're working through it. But I want you to try and do it yourself. And say we'll start it. We'll leave one space at the bottom. So we'll say, actually, we may as well just start at 0. So the first 2 ones are going to be empty. 5. Let's go one more, 45. Oh, these are quite big numbers. Okay. So let's draw a histogram first. And when you're done with your histogram, you can just write histogram in the chat. So I know how far you guys are with your histogram. So between 10 and 15 is 8. So there's my first one. Between 15 and 20 is 28. So I'm just doing this approximately. So that one, 20 and 25. Maybe just a little bit below. 25 and 30 would be 12. 30 to 35 would be 4. Oh, wait, no, I've gone too far. $35 to $40 is just 1 here. Okay, so that is my histogram. Now, to draw the frequency polygon, I just want us, before we actually draw it in, I want to do this little exercise where we get the coordinates of the points on the frequency polygon before we join them. And to do that, we're just going to find the midpoint of this. So that would be 12.5, and that would be 17.5. And then the coordinates of, now there will be an extra one for the end and the beginning. But can you give me the coordinate of this very first? So that's going to be 12.5. And then the y coordinate is going to be 8. Let me try and do that a bit more neatly. I'll zoom in a bit. So you can. So the coordinate of this one over here is halfway between 10 and 15, so 12.5. And the y coordinate is just going to be the frequency count, which is 8. What are these other coordinates going to be? And then once you've got them, I want you to draw in your frequency polygon. I'll give you some time for that. Oh, it's hard to draw this small. What's the count? Oh, it's 4, and then this one is, and the count here would be 1. So really, it's just going to be the midpoint is the X, and the frequency is the Y. So midpoint X, frequency Y. And that would be all of these points. And then we have to ground it. So there's an extra interval on each side to get those dots. When you have completed your frequency polygon, just type FP in the chat. I'm going to give you a bit more time, but when you feel like you've finished your frequency polygon, type FP in the chat. Oopsie days. And that is going to be my frequency polygon. Okay. Are there any questions about frequency polygons that anybody would like to ask? Orokanisa, can we unmute Orokanisa? Can you hear me, Orokanisa?
Hi, sir.
Hey, what can I do for you?
I wanted to ask if in the exam they say draw a polygon.
I think I heard cumulative frequency curve or ogive. Did I hear that, Orokanisa? Because that's what we're going to get to.
Frequency. Is it a must? Okay. Actually, it is that they stroke. Oh, okay.
Okay, I think the line's a bit bad, so don't worry. I think I got your question. We are going to talk about an ogive or cumulative frequency curve very shortly. But I just want to do one more question. In the next lesson, we'll start with ogives, cumulative frequency curves. That's what we're going to do. But I just want to finish, or maybe there's a bit of time today we can talk about, actually, you know what, we actually do understand, we can talk about this as the review in the next lesson. Let's introduce the new thing that we're going to do in the next lesson. Okay. So today's lesson has mainly been about drawing histograms and frequency polygons. But the main curve that we draw in group data is something called an ogive or a cumulative frequency curve. And it's similar in some ways, but it's different in other ways. So let's just read through what the sort of theory says. A cumulative frequency curve is a graph that shows the information in a cumulative frequency table. The graph is useful for estimating the median and interquartile range of the grouped data. Always remember, when drawing cumulative frequency curves or ogives from a table, the cumulative frequencies are plotted at the upper limit of the interval. So when they say the upper limit, they mean between 0 and 10, the upper limit would be 10. The upper limit between 10 and 20 would be 20. Now, before we can even worry about the points, so our cumulative frequency curve is going to have numbers or intervals going along here, but on this axis, we're no longer going to have frequency. What do you think we're going to have on the y-axis? What do you think we're going to have on the y-axis instead of frequency? Okay, we're going to have the cumulative frequency. Yes, the cumulative frequency. So what I want to do is I want you to work out, I'll give you a hint. I want you to work out the total, well, I want you to fill out the rest of this column by yourself, filling out the cumulative frequency column. See if you can do that. So I'll say, what are the values I'll make that A, B, C, and D. What are the values A, B, C, and D? What do we think A is going to be? So far, we've got 16 if we take those. To get to this point, I think we need to add 28. And so that should be 44. Because I've added that. What do we think B is going to be? I think we just need to add 32. Because we're accumulating the frequencies. So 44 plus 32 should be 76. What do we think the next interval's cumulative frequency is going to be? So we add 20 to get to 96, and then we add another 9, and we should get 105. And then for the last interval, we have 120. So what we know is that there are 120 data points in here because you've added up all the items. And what cumulative, so for example, what this means is up to this point, we've had 16 students, okay, fall into that range. If we go all the way up to this point, we've had 76 students who in that interval up to there. And if we go the whole way down, we have the total of 120 students. Now, how do we get from this to the ogive? It's going to be the topic of the next lesson. But just to show you a little hint, you take the upper limit of the interval. So this would be 10. And then the y coordinate is just the cumulative frequency. So if you imagine the next interval, what's the upper limit? It's 20. And then what's the cumulative frequency? It's not 12. It's going to be 16. For the next one, what's the upper limit? It's going to be 30. And then what is the cumulative frequency? It's going to be 44. So just to show you how this would work, how much time have we got left? Okay, we're a little bit, we're pretty much done for today, but I'll just show you this one thing. If I go from 0 to 10 to 20 to 30 to 40, and I have the cumulative frequency, and let's say this is going up in 5, 10, 15, 20, then the first, well, we always add 1 point to start, but my very first point would be 10, 4, which would be there. And then 20, 16 would be to go to 20 and then up to 16, which would be there. Now, we also add 1 extra point to ground it. So the grounding point will be here. And you can imagine how we'll carry on generating the dots. The other thing that's different about a cumulative frequency curve is it's not straight lines. It's just going to be curved lines. But that is just me doing an intro for the next lesson. The